10 years ago, I stood in the pouring rain, a single suitcase at my feet and my business degree clutched in my trembling hands. The echo of my father's words still rang in my ears, "Get out and never come back." All because I had dared to suggest that Walker Industries, our family's manufacturing company, needed to embrace digital transformation. My father, James Walker Sr., had exploded at the dinner table when I presented my graduation thesis. A comprehensive digital strategy that could have saved the company millions. "You think you can waltz in here with your fancy degree and tell me how to run my company?" he had roared, his face turning that dangerous shade of purple I'd grown to fear. "I built this empire from nothing while you were playing with computers." My mother, Eleanor Walker, sat silently, mechanically folding her napkin as she always did during my father's outbursts. She hadn't even looked at me when he ordered me to leave. That night changed everything. I found myself in a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, using my laptop to apply for any job I could find. My savings wouldn't last long, not in Boston. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from my younger brother James Jr., the only one who seemed to care. "Dad's wrong, Alex," his texts read. "Your ideas were brilliant. He's just scared of change." But I didn't reply. I couldn't. I needed to focus on survival first, revenge second. The next morning I walked into every tech startup in the city. By sunset I had a job entry-level data analyst at Digitech Solutions, a small but ambitious company. My starting salary was barely enough to afford a shared apartment in the city's worst neighborhood, but I didn't care. I had a plan. Every morning I arrived at the office 2 hours early. Every evening I was the last to leave. While my colleagues went for drinks after work, I studied machine learning, artificial intelligence, blockchain. I devoured everything I could learn about digital transformation. My boss, Miranda Chin, noticed. 6 months in, she called me into her office. "Alex," she said, studying me over her thick-rimmed glasses, "you're not just here for a paycheck, are you?" I told her everything about Walker Industries, about my father's rejection, about my dreams of revolutionizing the manufacturing sector. Instead of laughing, she smiled. "How would you like to lead our manufacturing division project?" That was my first big break. Within 2 years, I had built Digitech's manufacturing solutions department from scratch. Our client list grew exponentially, and so did my reputation. Industry magazines started featuring my innovations. Conference organizers begged me to speak at their events. But I never used my real name. In every publication, every presentation, I was Alexander Mitchell, not Alexander Walker. I couldn't risk my father finding out. Not yet. 5 years after being thrown out, I founded my own company, Phoenix Digital Solutions. The name was deliberate. Like the mythical bird, I had risen from the ashes of my father's rejection. The timing was perfect. Manufacturing companies worldwide were struggling to adapt to the digital age. My solutions were exactly what they needed. Within 3 years, Phoenix Digital had offices in 12 countries. All the while, I kept tabs on Walker Industries through my brother. The company was struggling. My father's stubborn refusal to modernize was costing them contracts. Their stock price was plummeting. "Dad's getting desperate," James Jr. texted me one day. "The board is threatening to force a sale." I looked at my office wall, at the framed copy of my original digital transformation proposal, the one that had gotten me kicked out. It was time. Through a series of shell companies, I began buying Walker Industries stock. Slowly at first, then more aggressively as their price continued to fall. Nobody noticed that the various investment firms suddenly interested in Walker Industries all traced back to one owner. Yesterday, my assistant placed a letter on my desk. The board of Walker Industries had approved the sale of controlling interest to Phoenix Digital Solutions. They had no idea they'd just sold their company to the son they'd thrown away. Today, I stood in the elevator of Walker Industries headquarters, wearing a suit that cost more than my father's car. My heart pounded as the numbers climbed to the top floor, where the board was meeting to meet their new owner. The doors opened and I heard my mother's gasp before I saw her. She was older now, her hair streaked with gray, but her perfectly manicured hands still fidgeted with her napkin, a habit she'd never broken. My father sat at the head of the board table, his face ashen as he recognized me. 10 years had turned his hair white and added deep lines around his eyes, but his expression of stunned disbelief was exactly the same as the night he'd thrown me out. "Ladies and gentlemen," the board chairman announced, "meet Alexander Mitchell, CEO of Phoenix Digital Solutions." And your new owner. The boardroom fell into a deafening silence. I could hear the gentle hum of the air conditioning and the muffled sounds of traffic 20 stories below. My father's face had turned from ashen to crimson, his hands gripping the leather armrests of his chair so tightly his knuckles turned white. "This is impossible," he finally sputtered. "This is some kind of joke." I smiled, the same cold smile he'd given me 10 years ago. "I assure you, Mr. Walker, this is very real." I pulled out a stack of documents from my briefcase. "Shall we review the acquisition terms?" My mother's coffee cup clattered against its saucer. "Alexander, please." "That's Mr. Mitchell in this setting, Mrs. Walker," I corrected her smoothly. "Or did you forget how to address business associates properly?" The board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. Most of them had known me since childhood, had attended company picnics where I'd played with their kids. Now they sat, shifting nervously as the prodigal son returned, not seeking forgiveness but wielding power. "Let's begin with the immediate changes," I continued, distributing folders to each board member. "First, the digital transformation initiative that was rejected 10 years ago will be implemented immediately. You'll find an updated version in Section 1 of your packets." My father's face twitched. It was the same proposal he'd dismissed as worthless theoretical nonsense the night he threw me out. "Second, the current management structure will be reorganized." I clicked a remote and the screen behind me lit up with a new organizational chart. "As you can see, several positions will be eliminated or consolidated." "You can't do this," my father interrupted, standing up abruptly. "I built this company. And I bought it," I replied calmly. "Legally. With cash. Your signature is on the sale documents, Dad. Or should I say Mr. Walker?" The board chairman cleared his throat. "James, he's right. The sale is complete. Phoenix Digital now owns 67% of Walker Industries." "Actually," I corrected him, "Phoenix Digital owns 71%. We acquired additional shares this morning." My mother's hand trembled as she opened her folder. "Alexander. Son, we can discuss this privately. As a family." I laughed, the sound echoing off the mahogany walls. "Family? Is that what we are? Tell me, when exactly did we become a family again? When the stock price started falling? When the board threatened to force a sale? Or just now when you realized who bought your company?" The room grew uncomfortably quiet again. Even the most seasoned board members seemed to shrink in their chairs. "For those wondering about their positions," I continued, "individual meetings will be scheduled this afternoon. My team has prepared detailed evaluations of each department's performance over the past 5 years." I pulled up another slide, this one showing a devastating decline in profits under my father's leadership. As you can see, Walker Industries has fallen behind its competitors in every measurable metric. The company's resistance to digital innovation has cost us market share, talented employees, and valuable contracts. "Those numbers are misleading," my father protested weakly. "Are they?" I clicked to the next slide. "Here's Phoenix Digital's growth over the same period. Notice the difference." The contrast was stark. While Walker Industries had been bleeding money, my company had experienced exponential growth. "Your precious traditional methods," I continued, "have nearly bankrupted this company. The only reason the Walker name still means anything is because I spent the last decade building a reputation in the industry, under a different name, of course." My father's face had turned an interesting shade of purple. "You deliberately undermined us." "No, Dad. You did that yourself. I simply built a better company. The company I tried to help you build 10 years ago before you threw me out in the rain." The board chairman coughed politely. "Perhaps we should take a brief recess?" "No need," I replied. "I have appointments with each board member scheduled already." "Linda." My executive assistant entered the room, tablet in hand. "Yes, Mr. Mitchell? Please escort the board members to their individual meetings. Start with Mr. Walker Sr. I believe conference room A is ready." As the board members filed out, I caught my mother's eye. She looked smaller somehow, her perfectly tailored suit hanging loosely on her frame. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the woman who used to read me bedtime stories about successful entrepreneurs, before my father's influence had turned her into a silent observer of his tyranny. "Mrs. Walker," I called out as she reached the door. "Your meeting will be last. I believe we have much to discuss." She nodded stiffly, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor as she followed the others out. Alone in the boardroom, I walked to the window, the same window where I'd stood countless times as a child, dreaming of running this company. The view hadn't changed, but everything else had. My phone buzzed. A text from James Jr. Just heard the news. Dad's having a meltdown in conference room A. Are you really going through with this? I typed back, watch and learn, little brother. This is just the beginning. By sunset, the Walker Industries building had transformed into a battlefield of corporate restructuring. Conference rooms that once hosted my father's self-congratulatory meetings now witnessed the dismantling of his legacy, one department at a time. I sat in what used to be his office, now mine, reviewing the day's meetings. The antique desk where he'd once pounded his fist rejecting my ideas now held my laptop displaying Phoenix Digital's transformation plans. The irony wasn't lost on me. A knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. Enter, I called out, already knowing who it would be. James Jr. stepped in, looking uncomfortable in his wrinkled suit. My younger brother, the one who'd stayed, who'd played by Dad's rules while secretly keeping me informed all these years. You could have warned me, he said, closing the door behind him. Would it have made a difference? He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit he'd picked up from our mother. Dad's in the hospital. I looked up sharply. What? Mild heart attack. Mom's with him now. The stress of today. The stress of his own failures, I corrected. His doctor's been warning him about his blood pressure for years. This isn't on me. James slumped into a chair. Isn't it? You orchestrated this whole thing. The secret buyout, the surprise revelation, the public humiliation. Like the public humiliation I endured 10 years ago? I stood up, walking to the window. Remember that night, James? You were the only one who called to check if I had somewhere to sleep. That was different. Was it? I turned to face him. Dad threw his own son out into the rain because I dared to suggest modernizing the company. Now look where his stubbornness got him, in a hospital bed, his company owned by the son he rejected. I pulled up a file on my laptop and turned the screen toward him. Look familiar? His eyes widened. It was the original proposal I'd presented 10 years ago, now updated with modern innovations and proven success metrics from Phoenix Digital. This is what I wanted to give him back then, I explained. A path to the future. But he couldn't see past his own ego. Now I'm implementing it anyway, but instead of it being his legacy, it's his defeat. And what about my position? James asked quietly. Am I being terminated too? I studied my brother, the peacekeeper, the one who'd tried to bridge the gap between me and our parents for a decade. That depends, I replied. Are you ready to actually lead instead of just following Dad's outdated playbook? What do you mean? I handed him a folder. Your performance reviews show potential, but you've been holding back. Afraid to challenge Dad's methods. That ends now. He opened the folder, scanning the contents. Vice President of Innovation? Are you serious? Dead serious. But understand this. It's not a courtesy appointment. You'll report directly to me and I expect results. No more playing it safe. James stared at the offer letter, his hands trembling slightly. Dad will see this as betrayal. Dad lost the right to an opinion when he signed over control of the company. I sat back down. The question is, are you ready to step out of his shadow? Before he could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Please come to the hospital. We need to talk. I showed the message to James. He sighed. You should go. Why? So they can try to emotionally manipulate me again? Remind me about family loyalty. No, he said, standing up. So you can finally say everything you've needed to say for the past 10 years. Face to face. No boardrooms, no shareholders, no corporate takeovers. Just truth. I considered his words. Fine. But first, your answer about the position. James looked at the offer letter again, then straightened his shoulders. I accept. On one condition. Which is? We don't just transform the company. We make it better than either you or Dad ever imagined. Together. I felt a smile tugging at my lips, the first genuine one of the day. Deal. As we walked out of the office, I glanced at the nameplate on the door. Alexander Mitchell, Sue. Tomorrow I'd have it changed back to Alexander Walker. Not for my father, not for the family name, but for me. Because I'd earned it the hard way. The hospital was 15 minutes away. During the drive, I thought about what I'd say to my parents. 10 years of anger, success, and calculated revenge had led to this moment. James texted me the room number. As I rode the elevator to the cardiac unit, I remembered something my father used to say: "Business isn't about feelings, son. It's about power." Well, Dad, I thought, watching the floor numbers climb. You taught me that lesson better than you knew. The elevator doors opened and I stepped out, ready for the final confrontation. After all, what's a corporate takeover without a little family drama? The smell of antiseptic and quiet beeping of monitors filled the air as I approached room 507. Through the window, I could see my father looking small and vulnerable in the hospital bed, a stark contrast to the imposing figure who dominated my childhood. My mother sat beside him, still in her designer suit from the board meeting, her perfect posture finally showing signs of strain. When she saw me through the glass, she straightened instinctively. Old habits die hard. I entered without knocking. The room fell silent except for the steady rhythm of the heart monitor. "Well," my father said weakly, "come to finish what you started?" "No, Dad. You finished it yourself 10 years ago. I just collected the debt." My mother reached for my hand, but I stepped back. "Alexander, please. Your father needs rest. What he needs is to understand something," I replied, moving closer to the bed. "Every success I achieved, every innovation I created, every dollar I earned, it could have been for Walker Industries. But you chose pride over progress, control over growth. I built that company," he began. "And I rebuilt it." I cut him off. "The difference is I won't make your mistakes. I won't let ego destroy what could be built through collaboration." I pulled out my phone and showed them Phoenix Digital's stock price, soaring since the acquisition announcement.
I stood in the shadows of Christie's auction house, watching my parents walk through the grand entrance. They hadn't changed much in 15 years. My father still carried himself with that air of absolute certainty. My mother still dressed to impress in designer labels that screamed old money. They had no idea I was here, no idea that the paintings they'd come to bid on were mine. I'm Isabella Mitchell, though the art world knows me only as I am, the mysterious artist whose abstract works now sell for millions. But 15 years ago, I was just their disappointing daughter who refused to get a real job. The memory of that day still burns clear in my mind. I'd come home from art school to find my paintings, 2 years of work, piled in the garbage. My father stood in my studio, now emptied of everything except my easel. "This ends now," he'd said, his voice cold with finality. "No more wasting time on worthless scribblings. You're going to law school, like we planned." My mother had stood behind him, nodding in agreement. "Darling, this little hobby of yours, it's not a career. The Mitchells are lawyers, not struggling artists." I can still feel the paint on my fingers as I dug through the garbage, salvaging what I could. One canvas survived, my favorite piece, an abstract study in blues and golds that my father had called meaningless splashes. That painting now hung in the Museum of Modern Art, valued at over $3 million. "Ms. Mitchell." My assistant David's voice pulled me back to the present. "They're about to start the preview. Your parents are heading toward Gallery 3. I nodded, adjusting my dark wig and sunglasses. After 15 years of careful anonymity, only a handful of people knew that I was Isabella Mitchell. My parents certainly didn't. They thought I was working as an art consultant in Chicago, making a modest living managing other people's collections. The truth was far different. That last canvas I'd saved became my signature style, launching a career that would revolutionize modern abstract art. But I never revealed my identity, never showed my face at galleries or openings. The mystery only added to my allure and to my prices. I followed my parents into Gallery 3, keeping my distance as they approached my latest series. 5 large canvases, each an exploration of light and shadow, chaos and order. The auction estimate started at $5 million per piece. "Extraordinary," my mother breathed, staring at the centerpiece. "The way the light seems to move through the darkness." My father consulted his auction catalog. "Im's Redemption Series. Starting bid $5 million each." He shook his head. "The art world has gone mad. Who pays this much for random paint splashes?" I smiled, remembering similar words from years ago. The difference was, now he wanted to own one of those random paint splashes. "Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell." A Christie's representative approached them. "I understand you're interested in bidding on the Anne collection?" My mother nodded eagerly. "Yes. We're redecorating our home in the Hamptons. An Im original would be perfect for the main salon. Everyone who's anyone has one now." I had to suppress a laugh. The irony was almost too perfect, my parents wanting my art not for its beauty or meaning, but because it had become a status symbol. "I must warn you," the representative said carefully. "There's already significant interest in these pieces. We expect them to go well above estimate." My father waved his hand dismissively. "Money is no object. The Mitchells always get what they want." Not this time, I thought, watching them move on to the next gallery. These paintings weren't for sale, not to them. I'd made sure of that. David appeared at my elbow. "Your parents seem quite taken with the collection." "They're taken with the prestige," I corrected him. "Just like they were taken with the idea of having a lawyer for a daughter." I turned to him. "Is everything set for tomorrow?" He nodded. "All the arrangements are made. When the truth comes out," I interrupted softly, 15 years of rejection will finally make sense. I walked closer to my paintings, remembering the long journey that brought me here. After my parents destroyed my work, I left home with nothing but that once salvaged canvas and a small inheritance from my grandmother. My parents had tried to control that too, but Grandma had been clever. The money came with no strings attached. I changed my name, moved to a tiny studio in Brooklyn, and started over. During the day, I worked as a gallery assistant, learning the business side of art. At night, I painted, developing my style, refining my vision. The first sale came unexpectedly. A small gallery owner saw something special in my work. Then another sale, and another. When my first piece sold for 6 figures, I made a decision. I would never let my parents' rejection define me. But I would also never give them the satisfaction of claiming my success. I became M, the artist without a face, letting my work speak for itself. The art world loves a mystery, and they loved M. Critics praised my fearless exploration of light and shadow. Collectors fought over my pieces. Museums began acquiring my work for their permanent collections. And through it all, I remained anonymous, watching from the shadows as my reputation grew. My parents, meanwhile, had to content themselves with updates about their sensible daughter's modest career in art consulting. Every Christmas, every reluctant family gathering, they'd remind me how I dodged a bullet by giving up my artistic dreams. "At least you're working in the art world," my mother would say, her voice dripping with condescension, "even if it's just managing other people's collections." If they only knew that their daughter's paintings now hung in the homes of billionaires and royalty, that the piece they called garbage was now studied in art schools as a masterwork of modern abstraction. A commotion near the entrance drew my attention. Several major collectors had arrived, including the director of the Guggenheim. They were all here for tomorrow's auction, an auction that would shock the art world and shatter my parents' carefully constructed reality. "Your father's making notes on the bidding estimates," David murmured. "Looks like they're serious about buying." I watched my father checking figures on his phone, probably calculating how much of his law firm's profits he could spend on an Im original. "Let them think they have a chance," I said quietly. "Tomorrow will be interesting enough." As I left Christie's that evening, I passed my mother in the lobby. She was talking excitedly on her phone about being this close to owning an Im. She looked right through me, not recognizing her daughter behind the disguise. In my car, a subtle but expensive Mercedes, I called my gallery owner, Marcus. "Are they suspicious?" "Not at all," he chuckled. "Your parents spent an hour talking about how they simply must have an Im for their collection. Your mother mentioned something about it being an investment in culture. If they only knew." I thought about the real investment I'd made, not in money, but in myself. When everyone else saw garbage, I'd seen possibility. When they demanded I conform, I'd chosen to transform. "Tomorrow then," I said, ending the call. At home, a penthouse overlooking Central Park, I changed out of my disguise and stood before my latest work in progress. It was different from my usual style, more personal somehow. Perhaps because I knew it would be the piece that finally revealed the truth. I picked up my brush, adding touches of gold to the swirling darkness. Tomorrow would change everything. Tomorrow, my parents would learn that the daughter they rejected had become the artist they couldn't afford. But tonight, I painted, just as I had every night for 15 years. Because in the end, this was never about them. It was about staying true to my vision, even when the whole world called it worthless. I worked late into the night, losing myself in the canvas, in the pure joy of creation that my parents had never understood. Outside my window, New York glittered like a painting itself, full of light and shadow, chaos and order. Tomorrow would bring its own kind of chaos. But for now, I painted, letting the colors tell the story I kept silent for so long. The morning of the auction, Christie's was buzzing with anticipation. Art collectors, museum directors, and critics filled the grand hall, all eager to bid on the mysterious Im's latest works. My parents sat in the front row, my father clutching his bidding paddle like a weapon. I watched from backstage, still in my disguise. In 30 minutes, 15 years of secrecy would end. Marcus, my gallery owner, approached with a concerned look. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. "Once we make the announcement, there's no going back." I touched the small canvas I brought with me, the one my father had thrown away all those years ago. "I'm sure. It's time." The auction began with smaller pieces, but everyone was waiting for the Am collection. Finally, the auctioneer cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we proceed with the Im Redemption series, we have a special announcement. For the first time in 15 years, the artist known as Im has agreed to reveal their identity." A murmur ran through the crowd. My father leaned forward, probably already calculating how this revelation might affect his investment. Marcus stepped up to the podium. "As Im's exclusive gallery representative, it's my honor to share this moment. But first, a piece of history." He gestured, and assistants brought out my salvaged canvas, the one piece that had survived my parents' purge. This work, now valued at over $3 million and hanging in May, was nearly lost forever. 15 years ago, it was thrown in the garbage by parents who called it worthless, who demanded their daughter give up art for a real career. My mother's face went pale. My father's hand tightened on his paddle. That daughter left home with nothing but this canvas and a determination to prove them wrong. She changed her name, developed her style in secret, and became the artist we know as Im. I stepped onto the stage, removing my wig and sunglasses. "Hello, Mother. Father. Surprised to see your garbage selling for millions?" The silence was absolute. My father stood up, his face contorted with shock. "Isabella?" "Actually," I said, approaching the podium, "it's I Am, though I suppose you never made the connection between your disappointing daughter and the artist whose work you're so eager to buy." My mother's carefully maintained composure cracked. But you're an art consultant in Chicago." "No, that was just a cover. I'm the artist you've been reading about, the one whose random paint splashes you suddenly find so valuable." I gestured to the Redemption series. "These pieces you wanted to buy. They're about transformation, about finding beauty in rejection. Rather fitting, don't you think?" The audience was captivated. Several people were filming on their phones, capturing a moment the art world's biggest mystery was revealed in such dramatic fashion. "This isn't possible," my father sputtered. "You can't be Im, we would have known." "Would you?" I challenged. "You never looked at my work, never tried to understand what I was creating. You were too busy telling me what I couldn't do to see what I was actually doing." Marcus stepped forward with a folder. "Perhaps you'd be interested in seeing these, Mr. Mitchell. Sales records for Im's work over the past decade, museum acquisitions, critical reviews. Your daughter isn't just successful, she's revolutionized modern abstract art." My father took the folder with trembling hands. $5 million. Per painting? "Actually," I corrected him, "these pieces aren't for sale, not to you. They're being donated to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, along with the story of their creation. A reminder that art's true value can't be measured by someone else's expectations." My mother stood up, tears streaming down her face. "Darling, if we'd known." "That's exactly the point," I cut her off. "You never tried to know. You were so convinced you knew what was best for me that you couldn't see what I was becoming." The auctioneer tried to restore order as whispers and camera flashes filled the room. Art critics were already typing on their phones, no doubt crafting headlines about the dramatic revelation of Im's identity. "The auction will proceed," I announced, "but with one change. All proceeds will establish a foundation for young artists whose families don't support their dreams. Because talent shouldn't be thrown away just because someone else can't see its worth." The applause was thunderous. In the front row, my parents sat in stunned silence, watching as their chance to own an Im original slipped away, along with their illusion of control over their daughter's life. Afterward, in the private viewing room, they tried to approach me. My father spoke first, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "Isabella, I don't know what to say." "There's nothing to say," I replied calmly. "You made your choices 15 years ago. I made mine." "We were wrong," my mother whispered. "So terribly wrong. Can you ever forgive us?" I looked at them, really looked at them, for the first time in years. They seemed smaller somehow, their certainty shattered, their worldview upended. "Forgiveness isn't the point," I said finally. I didn't reveal myself to get an apology. I did it because I'm done hiding my success to spare your pride. "But you're our daughter," my father protested. "Surely we can." "Can what?" I interrupted. "Claim credit for my success. Pretend you supported me all along." "No, I built this career despite you, not because of you." I gestured to my paintings, my redemption series. Each of these pieces tells a story of transformation, of finding strength in rejection. They're worth millions now, but their real value isn't in money. It's in what they represent, the triumph of believing in yourself when no one else does. Over the next few weeks, the art world buzzed with my revelation. Critics wrote lengthy pieces analyzing my work through the lens of my story. Galleries reported increased interest in supporting emerging artists. My foundation received thousands of applications from young creators facing similar rejection. My parents tried to reconnect, sending expensive gifts, making grand gestures. But they still didn't understand. This wasn't about money or success, it was about validation. About proving that art's worth couldn't be measured by someone else's standards. One evening, as I worked in my studio on a new piece, I received a message. A young artist, inspired by my story, had defied her parents' demands to give up painting. She was hosting her first gallery show. I attended anonymously, watching her explain her work to visitors with passionate intensity. Her parents weren't there. They'd refused to come. But she stood tall, believing in her vision just as I had 15 years ago. After the show, I left her a note. "Never let someone else define your worth. True art comes from believing in yourself, even when no one else does." In my studio that night, I looked at my salvaged canvas, the piece that started everything. It still spoke to me of determination, of finding beauty in rejection. But now it also reminded me that sometimes the most valuable things in life are the ones others throw away. I picked up my brush and began to paint, letting the colors flow freely. Because in the end, art isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right, one canvas at a time. I stared at my reflection in the elevator's polished doors, adjusting my purposefully cheap suit from Target. In a few minutes, I would sit through another excruciating family dinner where my successful siblings would take turns reminding me what a disappointment I was. If they only knew. The elevator opened to the exclusive restaurant's top floor, where my family was already seated at their regular table. The Martinez family, known for their chain of luxury hotels and their complete inability to recognize true success unless it came with a designer label. "Ah, Olivia finally decides to join us," my older sister Diana announced, checking her Cartier watch. "Some of us have important meetings tomorrow. We can't all keep retail hours." I slid into my seat, ignoring the way my mother's eyes critically scanned my off-the-rack clothes. "Sorry, got caught up at work." "Still at that boring office job?" My younger brother Michael smirked, adjusting his Italian silk tie. "What is it you do again? Processing payments or something?" "Accounts payable," I replied quietly, though that hadn't been my real job in years. "Someone has to do it." My father sighed dramatically, swirling his expensive scotch. "Olivia, you're 35 years old. When are you going to do something meaningful with your life? Your sister just closed a $20 million hotel deal. Your brother's real estate company is expanding nationwide, and you're still pushing papers. If they could see my bank account, they'd choke on their overpriced wine." But I kept that thought to myself, just like I've been doing for the past 7 years. Speaking of success, Diana practically purred. "Wait until you hear about tomorrow's meeting. Martinez Hotels is finally partnering with Summit Enterprises. Their CEO is flying in to sign the contracts personally." My heart skipped a beat, but I kept my face carefully neutral. Summit Enterprises, my company, though none of them knew that. $50 million, Michael added. "That's how much Summit is investing in Diana's new resort project. Now that's what real success looks like, sis. Maybe you should take notes." I took a sip of water, fighting back a smile. They had no idea that I'd spent the morning reviewing those same contracts, or that my signature would be the one they'd need tomorrow. The story of how I got here is one of quiet determination and careful planning. 7 years ago, I was exactly what they thought, a low-level accountant processing payments for a small tech startup. But unlike my siblings, who relied on our family name and connections, I paid attention. I learned. I saw opportunities they were too arrogant to notice. The startup I worked for had brilliant technology but terrible financial management. When they were about to go bankrupt, I used my savings and knowledge of their books to buy controlling interests for pennies on the dollar. The founders were relieved to have someone handle the business side while they focused on innovation. Within 2 years, that small startup grew into Summit Enterprises, now one of the largest technology and investment firms in the country. I kept my ownership private, operating through holding companies and letting others be the public face. I attended board meetings via video call, using voice modulation software to maintain my anonymity. While my siblings boasted about their millions, I quietly built billions. Summit Enterprises now owns significant stakes in over 50 companies, including some of my family's biggest competitors. But I never flaunted my success, never moved out of my modest apartment, never traded my simple Honda for a flashier car. The waiter arrived with another round of drinks, interrupting my thoughts. My mother launched into her favorite topic, my perpetual singleness. You know, Olivia, if you put a little effort into your appearance, maybe wore something nicer than department store clothes, you might find someone successful. Look at Diana. Her husband is a managing partner at Goldman Sachs. Diana preened. James and I are actually hosting a charity gala next month. $3,000 a plate, very exclusive. But don't worry, Olivia, we know that's not really your scene. Yeah, wouldn't want to embarrass the family in front of actual successful people. Michael chuckled. I thought about the invitation to that same gala sitting on my desk, addressed to Summit's CEO, begging for my attendance. The irony almost made me laugh. I'm happy with my life, I said simply, cutting into my steak. Not everyone measures success the same way. My father scoffed. That's what people say when they fail to achieve anything noteworthy. You had every advantage, the same opportunities as your siblings. You just wasted them. If he only knew how those wasted opportunities had turned out. Summit Enterprises was now worth more than the entire Martinez family fortune 10 times over. Oh, Diana suddenly exclaimed, her eyes lighting up with malicious glee. I almost forgot to mention, you know that little tech company you used to work for? Summit bought them, right? Imagine if you'd stayed. You could have been part of something successful for once. I carefully dabbed my lips with my napkin, suppressing a smile. Yes, imagine that. Summit Enterprises is incredible, Michael added. Their CEO is brilliant, very private, but absolutely ruthless in business. That's the kind of success you could have had, Olivia, if you hadn't been so mediocre. The Summit CEO is coming to the contract signing tomorrow, Diana said proudly. I hear they're very selective about their partnerships. Obviously, they recognize the Martinez name means something. Obviously, I murmured, checking my phone. An email from my CFO needed attention. Another acquisition in the works, bigger than anything my sister could imagine. Put that away, my mother snapped. It's not like you're getting any important messages. Show some manners. If she could see the 9-figure deal I was currently negotiating via email, she might think differently. But I just tucked my phone away obediently. The rest of dinner passed in its usual pattern. My siblings competing to showcase their achievements, my parents beaming with pride at their successful children, and everyone taking turns making subtle jabs at my apparent failure to launch. I let them talk, letting their words wash over me like background noise. Tomorrow they would all be in for the shock of their lives. The contract signing was scheduled for 10 a.m. at the Martinez Hotel's headquarters. Diana had been pushing for this deal for months, desperate to partner with Summit Enterprises. She had no idea she'd been negotiating with her unsuccessful sister the entire time. As we finished dinner, Diana couldn't resist one final dig. Don't worry, Olivia. Maybe someday you'll get to visit one of my luxury resorts. I might even give you the family discount. I smiled, thinking about the ocean view mansion I owned in Maui. That's very generous of you, Diana. Michael threw down his black Amex to pay the bill. Next time, dinner's at my new penthouse. Though I guess it might make some people feel a bit inadequate. He looked pointedly at my simple clothes. If they could see my real estate portfolio, they might feel a bit inadequate themselves. But I just nodded politely and gathered my Target purse. "Good luck with your meeting tomorrow," I said as we prepared to leave. "I hope everything goes exactly as planned." Diana smiled condescendingly. "Don't worry, little sister. Some of us know how to handle important business dealings. You just focus on not messing up your little payment processing job." I walked to my Honda Civic, parked between Diana's Mercedes and Michael's BMW. Tomorrow, I would arrive at their office in my real car, a Rolls-Royce Phantom. Tomorrow, they would finally see who I really was. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, I drove home to my deliberately modest apartment, logged into my secure computer system, and continued building my empire while they congratulated themselves on their small successes. Because true power isn't about showing off. It's about knowing exactly when to reveal your cards. The next morning, I dressed in my real clothes, a perfectly tailored Chanel suit that cost more than Diana's car. My assistant had arranged everything exactly as planned. The look on my family's faces would be priceless. The Martinez Hotel's headquarters lobby fell silent as I walked through the revolving doors at precisely 9:55 a.m. Gone was the Target clearance rack outfit, replaced by a full designer wardrobe that probably cost more than most people's cars. My assistant Thomas walked 2 steps behind me, carrying a leather briefcase worth more than my brother's monthly mortgage payment. The security guard did a double take. He was used to seeing me in my accounts payable disguise. I handed him my Summit Enterprises ID badge, not the usual Martinez Hotel's visitor pass I use when visiting my family. "Ms. Martinez," he stammered. "I didn't. I mean, you're not on the visitor list today." "Check again," I said calmly. "Under Summit Enterprises." His eyes widened as he found my name, my real name, on the VIP list. "Of course, Ms. Martinez. The executive elevator is right this way." I could feel the lobby's collective gaze following me as I walked to the private elevator. My Louboutin heels clicked against the marble floor, each step carrying the confidence of someone worth billions, not the meek persona I'd maintained for years. The executive conference room was on the top floor. Through the glass walls, I could see my family already assembled. Diana pacing nervously in her knockoff designer suit. I knew it was fake because my company owned the real designer's licensing rights. Michael straightening his tie compulsively. My parents sitting at the head of the table, looking proud and expectant. Thomas checked his watch. "They're expecting Summit CEO at 10 a.m. sharp. Are you ready?" I smiled. I've been ready for 7 years. At exactly 10 a.m., Thomas opened the conference room door. The conversation inside died immediately as I walked in. 4 pairs of eyes turned to me, expressions morphing from confusion to disbelief. "Olivia?" Diana's voice cracked. "What are you doing here? We're about to have a very important meeting." "I know," I interrupted smoothly, taking my seat at the opposite end of the table. "That's why I'm here." My father's face darkened. "This is not the time for your games, Olivia. Summit Enterprises CEO is arriving any minute." "Actually," I said, opening my briefcase and removing a thick contract, "Summit CEO is already here." The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's hand flew to her throat, her fingers clutching her pearl necklace. Michael's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "What are you talking about?" Diana demanded, her voice rising. "Where's the real CEO?" I smiled, sliding my business card across the table. Pure white cardstock embossed with simple black text. Olivia Martinez, CEO and founder, Summit Enterprises. My father snatched up the card, his face turning an interesting shade of purple. "This is impossible. Summit Enterprises is worth billions. You're just a what, Dad? A disappointment? A failure? The black sheep?" I kept my voice calm as I gestured to Thomas, who began distributing copies of the contract. "I think you'll find everything in order, though you might want your lawyers to review Section 7.2 carefully. The terms are quite strict about maintaining current management standards." Diana lunged for the contract, her hands shaking as she flipped through the pages. "This can't be real. You process payments for a living." "Actually," I corrected her, "I haven't processed payments in 7 years. I've been too busy building Summit Enterprises into one of the largest private companies in the world. That little tech company you mocked last night, I bought it when it was failing, just like I've bought dozens of other companies. including, as of last week, your husband's division at Goldman Sachs. Michael collapsed into his chair, his face ashen. The penthouse deal, the new development projects, all financed through Summit subsidiaries. I confirmed. You've actually been working for me for the past 3 years. Surprise. My mother finally found her voice. But your apartment, your clothes, that horrible little car. All part of a carefully maintained image, I explained. Not everyone needs to flaunt their success, Mother. Some of us prefer to be judged by our actual achievements rather than our appearances. Why? My father demanded. Why the deception? Why let us think that I was a failure? I finished for him. Because you never would have accepted my success if you knew about it. You would have tried to take control, to interfere, to claim credit, just like you've done with everything else in this family. I stood up, smoothing my channel skirt. Now, shall we discuss the terms of Summit's investment in Martinez Hotels? $50 million is a lot of money. We should make sure everyone understands exactly what they're signing. Diana's face had turned almost green. The negotiations. I've been negotiating with you this whole time. Through intermediaries, I nodded. Though I have to say, your initial proposal was rather inflated. Fortunately, I already knew the real numbers. The next hour was excruciating for them and deeply satisfying for me. I walked them through every detail of the contract, watching their faces as they realized just how completely I controlled the situation. Summit's investment would save Martinez Hotels from its mounting debt problems they tried desperately to hide from everyone, including each other. Of course, I added casually, this deal is contingent on some management changes. Diana, you'll be stepping down as project lead. We have someone more qualified in mind. You can't do this, she whispered. This is my project. My deal. Actually, I can. And it's my deal. Just like the last 3 successful projects you claimed credit for were actually backed by Summit subsidiaries. I turned to Michael. As for your real estate empire, we should discuss the leveraged positions you've been hiding from the family. Summit now owns the majority of your debt. My father stood up suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor. Now see here, Olivia. You can't just come in here and... I cut him off. And I have. Summit Enterprises isn't just another company, Dad. We control significant interests in over 50 major corporations. Your hotel chain. It's a small investment for us. A footnote. I let that sink in before continuing. But because you're family, I'm offering you a chance to save everything you've built. Sign the contract. Accept the management changes. Stop pretending to be more successful than you are. Or don't sign, and I'll watch everything you've built crumble when Summit calls in its markers. The room fell silent except for the sound of Diana's quiet sobbing. My mother had sunk into her chair, her perfect posture crumbling. Michael stared at the contract like it was a venomous snake. My father was the first to pick up his pen. His hand trembled slightly as he signed, decades of arrogance finally cracking. One by one, they all signed. As Thomas collected the contracts, I stood up. I have another meeting across town. My real office makes this building look like a storage shed, by the way. Thomas will go over the transition details with you. I walked to the door, then paused. Oh, and Diana, about that charity gala next month? Don't worry about my invitation. I bought the venue last year. In fact, I own most of the properties your events are hosted in. Interesting how that works, isn't it? The drive back to Summit's real headquarters gave me time to reflect. The look on their faces had been satisfying, yes, but this wasn't about revenge. It was about finally being free to be myself. My phone buzzed, a text from my mother. Why didn't you tell us? I thought about all the family dinners where they'd belittled my choices, all the snide comments about my clothes and car, all the times they'd made me feel small because I didn't fit their definition of success. Because I typed back, you never would have believed me. You only respect power when it's shoved in your face. Over the next few months, things changed dramatically. Diana was quietly moved to a minor role, her successful projects now properly attributed to Summit's management. Michael's real estate empire was restructured under Summit's oversight, his hidden financial problems resolved, but his autonomy severely restricted. My parents, well, they tried to rewrite history. Suddenly they had always seen my potential and knew I would be successful. They bragged about their brilliant daughter, the secret billionaire, conveniently forgetting all the years they treated me like a disappointment. I maintained my simple apartment, though I did finally upgrade my car. The Honda was donated to a women's shelter. My real homes, including the penthouse that occupied the top 3 floors of Summit's headquarters, remained private. The next family dinner was held in my real office, 60 stories above the city. I watched them take in the view, the priceless art, the evidence of true wealth that made their fortunes look like pocket change. "You know," I said, sipping a glass of wine that cost more than Diana's monthly salary, "success isn't about what you show people. It's about what you build when they're not looking." They had no response to that. Finally, after all these years, the black sheep had silenced the rest of the flock. But the best revenge? I still shop at Target sometimes. Because true power isn't about labels or appearances. It's about knowing exactly who you are and not letting anyone else define your worth.